Hello, this is astrologer coach Sonja Francis, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming full moon in 20.5 degrees of Scorpio, which will be exact on May 10th at 5:42 p.m. East Coast time in the US, which is also New York time, or at 2:42 p.m. Pacific time, which is also LA time. Now, for the next 2 weeks, we seek the balance and integration between two polarities, and we're more aware that something needs to be brought back into alignment. And the two polarities in question are the Taurus and Scorpio polarity. So we're looking for balance between the physical attachments and connections that we have in this world, symbolized by Taurus, and our emotional attachments and connections that we have with ourselves or others, that is symbolized by Scorpio. And so it's important to realize that Scorpio's deep, authentic connections to ourselves and others are really essential to our existence. And they really play a crucial role in defining and understanding what we value most, which is what Taurus wants us to understand, right? Now, this full moon energy so full moon energies are always more extroverted and emotional, and this particular full moon invites us to let go of fears and break through to the next level of our evolution. And here's this full moon central question: what do we really want as a society, as people, as individuals? Where do we need to feel more empowered, right? And so Taurus, which is one side of the polarity, seeks comfort and material stability. It's about having a healthy relationship with ourselves, the planet, and with anything connected to the physical plane, right? And it's definitely concerned with creating healthy self-esteem. Now, we talked about that in more detail already in our last new moon video that was about Taurus. Now, Scorpio, on the other hand, craves transformation, and it wants to put us in touch with our deepest desires and worst fears, to make all of it conscious and release what no longer serves us and what has become stale or toxic. So we're really, with Scorpio, we're being invited to move from a survival mentality to being passionately engaged with life. Fully and passionately engaged with life, right? So it's essential to bring a conscious awareness to the walls that we built in the past, to feel protected and empowered, so to speak. But it's kind of false empowerment. These walls create a false sense of empowerment. And so we need to be addressing past trauma and feelings of disempowerment. And that's really the only way to allow for ourselves to return to trusting others again and life in general. Because, of course, what happens with disempowerment or trauma, we very easily develop a distrust towards other people or towards life. So by acknowledging our fears and by breaking down those walls slowly and surely, by creating more consciousness and more awareness around these places within ourselves, we can really transform into truly powerful beings of love and inner strength. And very often these things can play out in our intimate relationships, because in our intimate relationships we get to experience and see more clearly where we have those walls or where we have those fears, right? And so that can teach us a lot about ourselves. Now, Scorpio wants to go beyond the surface to a deeper place, and also to our deeper motivations. And so for the next 2 weeks, ask yourself, what propels my sense of attraction or repulsion towards things, life, people, anything, right? And what turns me on about life? And what scares me? And just remember, with these questions, you don't have to answer them right away. You can sit with them, meditate on them, journal on them. You can just marinate in them and just allow them to be in the back of your mind as you go through the next 2 weeks, as you're feeling that full moon energy, right? And as always, with all the questions that I pose in my videos, they're also available on my website at astrologercoach.com via my weekly forecasts after May 7th. And you can also sign up for them to receive them via email by emailing us at info@astrologercoach.com and just writing weekly forecast in the subject line. And then my assistant will add you to that particular mailing list. All right. Now back to the full moon. The moon in Scorpio makes a trine to Neptune and Chiron in Pisces. Now what does that mean? This is definitely a favorable aspect that supports our ability to release and heal old traumas. And it really connects us to our feminine energy in a very supportive way. So allowing our fears to surface and bringing compassion and kindness to our feeling body is just a little bit easier with that combination for the next 2 weeks. And intuition and creativity and imagination will also be heightened. So I just want to invite you to kind of experiment with me with something. And you can do this right now, or you can do this at another time if you want to watch the video again later. But just imagine yourself in a survival mode or reacting from a fear-based protective place. And just give yourself a moment to really feel into that and imagine what that might feel like for you. Or maybe you can remember a past incident that you had where you came from survival mode or where you were reacting from a more fear-based protective place. And just ask yourself, what imagery comes to mind when you think about that? And what does your inner predator look like? And could you have compassion and understanding towards that inner predator? And feel free to pause here and to really take your time with that imagery and imagine what that really feels like for you, right? And when you're done, really feeling into that, I want you to now imagine yourself being passionately engaged with life, powerfully connected to your heart and to your loving strength that's inside of you. And then just ask yourself, what imagery comes to mind now? What can I tap into? What connections or imagery can I tap into now? And what does my higher self look like? And could I choose to embrace my inner divinity fully in this now moment? And again, just take your time with this. If you need more time, press the pause button and feel free to really tune into that higher self, tune into that inner divinity of yours, and just see what that feels like. And then once you're done with that, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what else is going on with this full moon chart. In contrast to the moon connection that's connected to Chiron and Neptune, Mars, which is the traditional ruler of Scorpio, is currently in Gemini, and therefore we seek out mental stimulation. So we talked about that a little bit already in our last new moon video, the Taurus new moon video. Mental stimulation is anything from like sharing information, teaching, learning, writing, connecting, talking about things, right? So all of that is what Mars in Gemini desires to do. And so what also is very prevalent with that type of combination is we want to move fast, and patience is not so much on the top of our list, right? So we were not very patient with Mars in Gemini. Now Mars squares Neptune in Pisces and trines Jupiter in Libra. So let's talk a little bit about that, right? Mars squaring Neptune brings up the challenge between connecting to our heart and our mind. And it's really sort of like Mars in Gemini is very extroverted. Neptune in Pisces is very introverted. So it's really about looking at the difference between introverted versus extroverted, slow versus fast, inner versus outer, right? So being in touch with our intuitive knowingness, which is Neptune in Pisces, versus our learned knowing, information that we're learning in the outside world, which is more Mars in Gemini. right? So we're being asked to stretch ourselves here in order to resolve that tension between those two different energies, right? And also, there is our mind in Gemini, right? Things our mind tells us to go after with Mars in Gemini, versus the need to tap into our intuitive sensing and feeling, and in particular feel our way through something, right? Which is Neptune in Pisces. So as best as you can, slow down and listen to your intuition before aimlessly zooming ahead into a situation, right? And here we're once again invited to integrate head and heart. And as best as you can, let your heart guide your actions, right? And again, it means we have to stretch ourselves a little bit during these next 2 weeks. So ask yourself, what would it look like if I could inspire myself and others? What thoughts would I share? What words would I use? What actions would I take? And what might come to be if I attempted to be courageous and kind with myself and others? And I think that's a very powerful question with this particular aspect. What might come to be if I attempted to be courageous and kind with myself and others? Right? So remember to just kind of marinate in those questions. You don't have to answer them right away. Just allow yourself to be with them and let the answer come to you, right? Now, the trine to Jupiter here brings optimism and enthusiasm and expansion to our relationships and collaborations with other people. So especially with Mars being in Gemini, that's connected to siblings, people we grew up with, and people in our neighborhood. And so we feel good about those connections and able to have some fun adventures with these people, right? Or with those people in our lives. And Pluto, the modern ruler of Scorpio, which is also important in this full moon chart, is currently in Capricorn. And we're being asked to look at our lives and our long-term plans. And we're attempting to feel empowered from within rather than feeling powerful over others, especially also since Pluto is retrograde right now. And so we're birthing a new paradigm based on the power of love versus the love of power. And so it's important to remember that a healthy self-love is also a form of love, right? So self-love is very important here. In particular, of course, also with the sun being in Taurus, right? Taurus is all about self-love and honoring ourselves and valuing ourselves, right? So ask yourself, how authentic am I being in the world? And am I consistently empowering myself and others? Or at least as best as I can, am I as best as I can empowering myself and others? And how am I doing at letting go of behaviors and impulses that arise from trauma or a sense of threat? And I think this is a very powerful question. It may take a little bit longer to maybe unravel that question and allow ourselves to really have some insight into that question. So just allow yourself to really sit with that question for a little bit or journal on it. How am I doing at letting go of behaviors and impulses that arise from trauma or a sense of threat? And of course, this is very often connected to past trauma, right? And the sometimes past trauma will get triggered in the now moment through something that we're experiencing in the now that reminds us of that past trauma, right? So it's important to kind of be conscious of that and allow ourselves to see that. Now, Pluto is trining the sun in Taurus and sextiling the moon in Scorpio. So this makes it easier for us to recognize what we value most and how to manifest it long-term in the real world. So this is definitely a favorable combination for feeling empowered. And we can really transform what no longer serves and build healthy foundations for those long-term goals that we're building currently, right? So ask yourself, what feels most satisfying to me personally? And what are my priorities? What are my priorities? What is my bottom line? What is the simplest path that manifests all of that long term? And am I motivated by love or fear? And of course, this last question is very important and is something that we often ask ourselves as we're talking about Pluto and as we're talking about empowerment, right? Because the motivation of love or fear is exactly what we want to pay attention to, and is exactly what we want to bring more consciousness to, because that will help us to transform some of that past trauma into a more conscious, powerful connection to ourselves and life, right? Now, Pluto is also squaring Jupiter in Libra. And of course, this has been an aspect that's been going on for quite a while. And this long-term aspect really asks us to think about the long-term consequences of our actions and interactions with others. So it really sends the message that we need a new perspective. You know, it is required that we see things differently, especially on our social, religious, or cultural programming that we have enjoyed growing up. And we want to know how that affects our relationships and our long-term goals. And so with both of those planets being retrograde currently, that means that we really need to tap into this from the inside out. It's an internal process, and the adjustment needs to happen internally, right? And so feel free to also read my article about the cardinal T-square involving Uranus, Pluto, and Jupiter on this subject that I wrote several weeks ago, or I think maybe a couple months ago. So just email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write T-square in the subject line, and then my assistant will email you that article. You can also read it on my website or on my Facebook fan page in the notes section via your computer. All right, so all of these are options. Now, Venus is the other planet that, of course, we want to take a look at, because Venus is the ruler of Taurus, which is the other polarity that we're dealing with this full moon. And so Venus is currently in Aries and adds its influence to this full moon. And so we grow more conscious as we are creating our lives and as we're tapping more into our courageousness. So we grow more conscious that we are the ones creating our lives, and we can really summon more courage with Venus in Aries. And what we desire right now is really forward movement while staying true to our own values and individual needs. And so we really seek passionate connections and goals right now with Venus in Aries, right? So you can ask yourself, am I being true to myself? And what am I feeling passionate about? What am I feeling truly passionate about? And am I ready to open my heart to what I truly desire? And again, these questions are very important as well for us to find that balance between those two polar opposites, right? And the last thing I would like to mention in connection with this full moon chart are the moon nodes, because the moon nodes switch from Pisces, Virgo to Aquarius, Leo on May 9th and will remain in those signs until November 2018. So this is quite a long time, and the moon nodes show us what our soul's journey currently requires on an individual and on a collective level. So the last time the moon nodes were in those signs was October 1998 until April 2000. So think back to that time and see, where were you moving during that time? What was shifting or changing for you during that time? Or how was your soul's journey evolving at that time, right? And so let's take a closer look at what that means. In Leo, the North Node invites us to come from the heart, to have courage, embrace our creativity, express ourselves authentically. And we are really being asked, so for the next 18 months or so, we're being asked to move towards joy and shine our individual light. And the Aquarius South Node requires that we redefine any groups and networks that we belong to, right? So it's really about releasing dogmatic thinking or dogmatic group consciousness. So anything that feels kind of stuck or rigid, right? And allowing our head and heart to merge and really to create a better future for humankind, to really tap into that visionary energy and consciously create a better future with the help of our heart, right? So it's not just a mind activity, but to connect the mind with that vision energy with the heart energy. So what might be possible if we connected our concepts for a better future to our personal expression of joy? And just remember, this is about being the change that you want to see in the world. So how can we create change that is in alignment with our heart? You know, that's really authentic. You know, how can we create authentic change? And so we will also talk about that in more detail in our next forecasting forum. And if you want to know how the moon nodes movement impacts you personally, join us on Thursday, May 11th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, 6 p.m. London time. And you can register now if you go to my website at astrologercoach.com and just click on the link there. And I will talk a little bit more about that a little bit later as well, just if in case you haven't joined us yet and you want more information, right? But for now, to sum it all up, with this full moon, long-standing patterns demand to be addressed right now. And the good news is that we have the courage to do just that. And so it really is about stepping into a more fully empowered experience of ourselves. And as best as you can, therefore, it's important that we release what we have outgrown and focus where we have influence rather than forcing things and struggling to change what we don't have any control over. So ask yourself, how might I grow and evolve in my relationships or even in my whole life right now? And is there a relationship that I need to grow or evolve out of? And be really honest with yourself here. It's not just something whimsical that you're deciding. It's really sort of like really feeling into that and seeing like, well, what feels disempowering to me? You know, and do I need to make a change? And what does it mean to have long-term commitments based on trust, love, and a genuine desire for deeper connections? And that's a very, very powerful question, so much connected to this full moon energy. So really allow yourself to sit with that and meditate on that or journal on that. You know, what does it mean to have long-term commitments based on trust, love, and genuine desire for deeper connections, right? And yourself included in that, right? It's not just with others, it's with yourself too, right? Now, if you do have an ascendant, career point, or personal planets in 18 to 23 degrees of Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, or Aquarius, then you certainly are going to feel the effects of this full moon more strongly. And also the natal houses in the birth chart that are affected by this full moon indicate which area of your life need integration for the next 2 weeks. And so take a look at your birth chart if you have that in front of you. 20.5 degrees of Scorpio or Taurus. Look to see where that lands in your birth chart. They're exactly opposite each other, these 2 points. And what do those houses or those areas of your life represent? You know, how can you create a balance or integrate those 2 areas in your life, or connect to the emotional or to the physical more fully, right? And so if you'd like to dig into this, I want to once again recommend watching my video on how to read your birth chart. If you don't have a birth chart yet, then I want to invite you to watch this video until the very end, because I will talk about how you can get a free visual of your birth chart online. And also, if you haven't joined our monthly forecasting forums before, this is also a really, really great video to watch before joining our monthly forecasting forums. So just email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write recording in the subject line, and my assistant will send you that recording with a couple of really amazing handouts. I also want to mention very briefly, about the monthly forecasting forum, like I mentioned earlier, these forums are really, really supportive. And this is why I created them. And it's really the next best thing besides getting a one-on-one reading with me. So, since it's more affordable than getting a one-on-one reading with me, I highly encourage that you give it a shot and that you come join us at least once, just to see what that feels like, to be able to take your own birth chart and apply what is coming up on a monthly basis, and to see how that is impacting you personally, right? And with the next forum, we're going to be talking about the moon nodes, which will be moving into Aquarius Leo until November 2018, which I already mentioned, right? And so we will address the soul's journey on an individual and on a collective level in that 90-minute webinar, and how that is impacting you personally, right? So join us if you like on Thursday, May 11th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and 6 p.m. London time. If you can't make it for those particular times or that particular day, you can also sign up for a video recording, which is just as valuable. I will send that out within 24 hours of the live event, because you can also ask questions in advance, and I will do my very best to answer everybody's questions. So if you sign up on my website at astrologercoach.com, make sure that when you click on that link and you get to the monthly forecasting forum page, that you also fill out the registration form at the very bottom of that page, as well as making your payment, because that registration form gives you the ability to ask questions and to also let me know if you're joining live or not. And I please want to ask you to ask questions that are related to what's coming up in May within the next 30 days or so, energetically speaking, right? Also, you can join me for daily forecasts on my Facebook fan page or on Twitter. That's also available if you guys are curious about what's going on energetically speaking on a day-to-day basis. That's very valuable too. And again, all the questions from this video are also available on my website at astrologercoach.com via my weekly forecasts after May 7th. And you can also sign up to receive them via email at info@astrologercoach.com by writing weekly forecast in the subject line. And if you prefer not to receive weekly emails, you can also sign up for my newsletter. Those emails go out only twice a month, sometimes 3 times a month, but mostly twice a month. And these emails have my special offers in them, videos, announcements about my business, my courses, my webinars, and so on, right? So if that's of interest to you, feel free to email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write newsletter in the subject line, all right? Now, I hope you have a fantastic full moon. Remember to reach out for support if you're feeling too stretched by everything that's going on and you feel the need to really create more consciousness in understanding what's going on in your life. Feel free to reach out for support. I'm always available for a reading or for a coaching session if you want my type of support, but also feel free to reach out to support that works for you, that is in alignment with what you need at the time. Now, you can email me at Sonja@astrologercoach.com if you have any general questions about the full moon, and any personal questions that require of me to pull up a chart. I will ask you to book a reading with me or a coaching session at astrologercoach.com. And any questions that are connected to what's coming up within the next 30 days or so, feel free to join the monthly forecasting forum and ask your questions there. All right? So have a good one. This is Astrologer Coach Sonja Francis. Goodbye.